Productivity is a popular goal to strive for. Self-optimizers, executives, managers all love productivity, and there are plenty of guidebooks, self-help books, trainers, consultants who all want to help us to become more productive. However, curiously, in our day-to-day work, faking productivity is often rewarded more than actual productivity. And this is what we will talk about in this new Soft Skill Talk. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and I welcome you to this new Soft Skill Talk. In your day-to-day work, you have probably encountered situations where faking productivity was rewarded instead of actual productivity. And this is what we will talk about today. Let's start with the most obvious classic example, which is performance versus attendance. And this is somewhat understandable because performance is often hard to see, while attendance is quite easy to observe. Let's think of an example. I'm thinking of a standard office job here. You arrive at work in the morning and so does your coworker. And they really work hard, they put a lot of effort into it and make great progress and whatnot. But after 6 hours, they suddenly stand up and say, oh well, I'm finished with my work, I'm tired now, I'm going home. The entire department will probably be flabbergasted and shocked and speechless. The superiors will probably fall off their chair from shock and surprise, and this is totally unthinkable. Let's think of a more realistic example. Again, you arrive to work in the morning, so does your coworker, and this time everything is right with the world because they stay for the full 8 hours. Well, they do some Facebook surfing and internet surfing, and they plan the next vacation, and they do some online shopping, and in the end they do about 2 hours of actual work throughout the entire day. A lot of you will now probably say, oh yeah, I have a colleague like that, I know this type or whatever. So this is quite a common example. And I guess you see the problem. Another example is overtime. If people are voluntarily staying longer, putting in some extra time, this is always highly regarded as something positive and praiseworthy. I've never seen anyone being praised for finishing their work within the usual working hours. Now, of course, there are plenty of possible reasons for overtime, some of them quite dark and problematic, so I won't delve deeper into that, but of course, this can be one possible situation. Now, probably the worst example of performance versus attendance is when someone shows up to work while being sick and is praised for it. We had a specific video about this topic, so I will only briefly summarize the damage they cause. First of all, people who come to work sick in the end have more sick days than people who just stay at home when they're sick. Then, of course, they infect colleagues who in turn have to have sick days, stay at home or whatever. And finally, people who are working sick make more mistakes that cause additional costs. In the best case, costs for fixing the mistakes. In the worst case, well, there is probably no limit. A similar issue is performance versus busyness. Imagine a situation where you are at work, but there is nothing to do. That doesn't occur often, but it occurs from time to time. Well, first of all, I would have a look around, see what my colleagues are doing, check if maybe I can help anyone. But let's say my colleagues have nothing to do either, or at least nothing I can help with, so I really end up with nothing to do. What do I have to do in such a situation? Do I have to fake that I'm working? Do I have to pretend that I work? As we've learned in the review of David Graeber's Bullshit Job, this can be quite taxing, quite stressful. If you ever had to do it, you probably know from your own experience. And of course, it greatly undermines the value of real work and actual productivity. Even more problematic is the issue of breaks, because taking breaks is the easiest and most effective way to improve productivity. If you are dissatisfied with your own productivity, first of all, check if you are taking sufficient breaks. Frequency is more important than duration, so taking breaks more frequently is better than taking longer breaks. However, at work, taking breaks is often regarded as something negative, as a sign that people are lazy, not committed enough, or whatnot. And this is, of course, quite paradoxical, because breaks actually increase productivity. Now, a great example I encountered at a big company where I was working for a while once. In their lobby area, in the ground floor, they had some small egg-shaped cabin thingies, like small chairs, like eggs with an opening on one side that you could sit in, and on the inside it was all fluffy and comfortable, so you could sit in them, and you were shielded from outside noise and distractions, and you could take a short nap. In all the time I was there, I've never seen anyone actually do that. I've never seen anyone use those egg-shaped sleeping cabins. Because obviously, if an employee says, oh well, I'm totally wasted, I'm so tired, I will have to take a short nap to be productive during the next 6 hours, then the problem is not that no one gives them some fluffy egg-shaped thing. The problem is that the company culture will usually not allow it. There is, by the way, also a form of business specific for superiors, which is micromanagement. Because if people are supposed to be productive, one of the basic requirements is that they have some freedom. It should be clear to them what the goal is, but how to get there should be primarily up to them. They should have some freedom, some creative freedom to decide how to do it. But of course, it looks bad if the boss is just sitting in their office twiddling their thumbs. It looks much better if they are closely supervising people, telling them in detail what to do and how to do it, and just stick to them all the time, even though this clearly lowers productivity and lowers morale. There is another topic in regard to superiors, executives, and that is performance versus quick wins. Because one of the most important tasks of executives is the long-term planning, preparing for tomorrow, making sure the company is successful in the long run. And this is a big challenge. We know that from our personal lives, because there are often situations where we have to work today, put in an effort, make a sacrifice, forgo something nice in order to obtain a reward sometime later. Like if we save for retirement, we have less money today and the reward is sometime in the far future. And we don't like that because the work is right now and the reward is sometime later. We'd rather have it the other way around. And this, of course, also applies to executives in a business environment. And for them, having the reward right now means going for quick wins, for low-hanging fruits, for successes, achievements that are easy to realize, easy to get, even though they aren't really meaningful, even though they aren't important in the long run. Imagine as an executive, you're sitting in a business meeting with the higher echelons of company leadership and you say, oh well, our quarterly results aren't that great, we haven't achieved anything else either, but the future will be great. Okay, imagine your colleague saying, well, we have great quarterly results and lots of small additional achievements. Now, this person might have set the company on a track straight towards ruin, disaster and bankruptcy and whatnot, but he will probably be more popular in that meeting. The underlying issue here is how a company deals with incentives, what is measured in what way, how KPIs, key performance indicators are defined, and so on. Because once something is turned into an abstract measurement, once something is represented by an abstract measurement, that measurement becomes reality and actual reality no longer means anything. If the success of the company is represented by the quarterly results, then everything people care about will be the quarterly results and long-term success will no longer be of any concern. And we shouldn't point fingers at executives here because we do that ourselves in our personal lives as well. Imagine I have a lot of things to do, then I will write a to-do list. Let's say I have about 20 bullets and some of them are really difficult. They require a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of work. But there are probably 5 to 10 points, 5 to 10 bullets on that list that are quick and easy to achieve. So I will just do those, cross them out, and then I say, oh, great work, great success, I'm finished for the day. We like this kind of self-deception. This short-term versus long-term aspect is also relevant for performance versus self-sacrifice. All of you probably know some people who really give everything for their company, who make great sacrifices, whom you receive business emails from long after working hours, who even work during the weekends, who work during their vacations. Often this is accompanied by some performance ideology, like work-life balance is just a myth, just a legend, it's for losers, you have to forego that in order to be really successful. It would be best to work like the Chinese do, 996, 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the evening, 6 days a week, like in the darkest times of industrialization. And you really have to make lots of sacrifices if you want to make it to the top. And this is quite a questionable ideology because performance is also a matter of, is also a long-term thing. Performance is not a short-term or just once matter, but it is the long term that is relevant. As people like to say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you are super productive for 2 or 3 years, but then you have a breakdown, get burnout treatment for half a year, and then you do some career reorientation and you open a coffee shop or a flower shop, then overall, on average, your productivity wasn't that great. Relaxation and recreation is not our reward for productivity. It is a very basic requirement for productivity. If we want to be productive and effective, not just for 2 or 3 years, but for 5 years, 10 years, and even longer, then relaxation and recreation need to be an integral part of our day-to-day lives. Just as with the quick wins, we can of course make a lot of sacrifices today and pretend how great we are, how committed and whatnot, and get people's praise for that. But this won't work out in the long run. I do believe, by the way, that there are people who really live for their work, where personal passions and their work completely overlap, where work is so enjoyable to them that they like to do it all around the clock and whatnot. And they can do this. This is perfectly fine with me, no objections. However, this isn't something you can require from anyone. You can tell people to do a certain work, but you cannot tell them to like it or to enjoy it. This is just not possible, so this can never be a requirement. Speaking about people's attitude, there is also the matter of performance versus conformity. Now, the ideal employee, of course, is always positive, always in a good mood, highly motivated, always smiling, and so on. But what if things go wrong? What if there is a problem? Will you just make a happy face, go to your desk, pretend nothing's wrong? Or will you speak up, openly address the problem, maybe even contradict your superior? They certainly won't like that. But if problems are not addressed and openly dealt with, there will never be any improvement. In Germany, there is a phrase, das haben wir immer so gemacht, this is the way we've always done things, which has become a cliché for old encrusted structures and companies that will probably not much longer be around. Speaking about old encrusted structures, sometimes you have the matter of performance versus the open plan office. Sometimes you have companies that in their self-presentation on their website and whatnot tell everybody how committed they are to productivity and all the other great things like innovation and whatnot. However, if you actually enter their premises, if you actually enter their offices, the first thing you see is a big open plan office, the ultimate killer of productivity, where lots of distractions and background noise clearly make sure that no concentrated work can ever take place. As a nice addition, you also have lots of heat in the summer without any countermeasures. You have lousy air quality all day long, probably outdated technology, some devices that don't work, and antiquated software. So, in their self-presentation, the company is committed to productivity, but in real life, the working conditions clearly prevent any form of productivity taking place. Now, all of this is well established, but what do we need to do if we want to change the situation, if we really want a shift towards productivity? I believe that the important thing here is to really start at the very base, start at the very roots, and transform the company culture. If you try to implement any policies, any changes without changing the company culture, you will end up with something like those sleeping egg cabins that are not actually used because it doesn't fit the company culture. And I believe this has to be a top-down transformation where executives, management, etc. lead the way and lead by good example. For example, where superiors themselves make sure to take regular breaks, where they immediately send home anyone who arrives at work sick, so everyone clearly sees this shift towards productivity is taken seriously and where they start taking part themselves. I believe if this transformation succeeds, if a company culture that really favors productivity is implemented, then this paves the way for further changes, further policies, and it is possible to even tackle issues like the problem of attendance, performance versus attendance. For example, a system where working time is not closely monitored, closely checked, but based on trust between employees and employer can work out if that trust is really there. If neither employees nor employer will exploit that system and abuse that system, then this can really work out and really improve productivity. Another measure I like because it is very pragmatic is when a company says, all right, people, if you can do the same work you currently do in 8 hours in 6 hours, then we allow you to work 6 hours at the same pay. This makes sense from my point of view, because if you check studies that deal with the question how much work is actually done during an 8-hour day, the result usually is something like 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours max. So in my eyes, it makes sense to reduce working hours. Now what you have to keep in mind, if a company really transforms and shifts towards productivity, this will create new challenges and new requirements, new needs, because for example, if an employee really wants to be productive and tries to be productive, then they will need to understand how they fit into the big picture. They will need to understand what that other department does, where they receive results and materials from, and they will need to understand what is done with the results they themselves create and what that other department does with them. They will need to understand how everything fits together. And this is something that is highly unusual in most companies. People know what their own department is doing, and they don't get to know about anything else and aren't interested in it either. And also this long-term planning idea is something a lot of executives aren't used to, at least here in Germany. What is the primary objective for a lot of executives is to maintain the status quo and make sure nothing changes. So this is a big change, a big transformation. What you can do right now is subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'm afraid this won't help with productivity, but I would be quite happy about it. We will see each other again next week. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.